Welcome back, everybody, to DSP versus the Internet, episode 52 for the 18th of February, 2024. We are still in Ultra Member submissions. Let's continue and see what the Ultra Members have for me to watch this week. Here we go.
There is no crime as sickening as one against a child, and no individual as culpable as an adult who should be protecting that child.
This is interesting. Does Singapore need harsher laws for sexual crimes against children? We've been talking about Singaporean law in the last year. It's been a topic of discussion on this show, and most people, at least that I see from in the chat and the viewership, feel that Singaporean law is already too strict on everything, right? I wonder what is the Singaporean law for any crimes against children, right? I'm very curious. And then I guess there's going to be some commentary here on, should it be even stronger, right? I don't know. So what's interesting is I feel like last time around, one of the things that we investigated was why they don't have a lot of cars in Singapore. And the reason is not only do you have to buy the car, but then you have to buy this giant license to drive it that costs like $50,000 for 3 years, in which case it becomes uneconomical for most people to have a car. Even me, that would be uneconomical for me. I probably wouldn't drive. I would use public transportation if that were the case. So is that good to have a country where a lot of people can't do things because it's so restrictive with their laws, right? So that was an interesting take because it was kind of not propaganda at all. It was more interesting to see a more open-minded perspective on it. So now, what about this? Let's take a look. It's only a 3-minute video.
I'm Stephanie Yuan Theo, and I'm joint managing partner at TSMP Law Corporation. A 47-year-old man forced his lover's 2 children, aged 8 and 9, to watch pornography and then reenact the scenes while he filmed them.
God.
This happened over 3 years. He was a diagnosed pedophile who had previously done jail time for sexually abusing other children.
And he still keeps... Now, hold on, because if he had already been arrested, he had already been punished for it. Here, at least this with the United States, he'd go on the sex offender registry. Everyone would know that there's a sex offender in their neighborhood, and basically he wouldn't be allowed near children. Like, he'd be against the law. He'd be arrested if he went near kids. So, what is going on in Singapore that he was then having more access to children, and he just continues his crimes, right? Like, what the heck?
Raped his granddaughter.
Oh my God.
20 years back, he had done the same thing to his own daughter and her friends.
What the hell?
And had been sent to jail and had 12 strokes of the cane. When you hear stories of intrafamilial
That's insane. So he got arrested and got caned 12 times, and that was supposed to stop it?
Is upsetting. Intrafamilial sexual violence. It's appalling. We should be doing more. The first thing we think about is whether the laws can be beefed up, made more robust.
So let me get this straight. In Singapore, if you get caught with drugs, you could possibly be executed, depending on the level of severity of the drug offense. Like, I'm assuming if you're found someone who's making the drugs or selling them, you could actually be murdered, executed in Singapore. But if you're found to be sexually abusing children, you simply get some jail time and a caning? Yeah, I have to agree. The laws are... That doesn't sound right. Right? What happened there? How are you so extreme in one case and so not extreme in the other? That's very weird.
Enforced more diligently. The government has recently introduced proposed changes in the Criminal Procedure Code. If a judge believes that the accused might pose a danger to public safety, even after he's done his time, he can bring the accused under a new framework called the Sentence for Enhanced Public Protection. That means that at the end of the sentence, the minister, in consultation and with the advice of a review board, will then determine whether he's safe to be released or whether he needs to be detained. When you enforce laws, it means that the crime has already taken place. I think one of the issues is whether we are holding bystanders liable. If you have custody, care, or control of a child, you have an obligation, if you know that they are likely to be subject to abuse, to take some action. And the courts should be sending a stronger message to these bystanders. I think some family members will sometimes feel that they don't want to upset the family structure, especially if the alleged offender is a principal breadwinner. In Asian cultures,
That's fucked up. So just because someone might be, someone who's basically making all the money for the family, just accept the fact that they're a pedophile and let it happen? What? No. Absolutely not. Even if it means breaking up the family, it has to happen. You cannot have a child be abused in that situation just to have this family stay together. That's insane. That's literal insanity. So someone has to just be a ritual or a habitual victim over and over, a chronic victim of some sicko because you need them to make money? Like, that's ridiculous.
also there may be a sense of not wanting to shame and humiliate the rest of the
What?
family and yourselves.
Why? How is it a shame of the rest of the family and yourselves because one person is fucking doing awful things to kids? That's not a shame on the family and yourselves. It's a shame on the one person. That's it. What is this weird thing in there? Like she just said, it's a part of Asian culture. Why? That's fucked up in my opinion. No, the offender, just because there's one person, that shouldn't now be representative of the entire group or the entire, you know what I'm saying? Not at all. I don't feel that way. Listen, I have people in my family who have done awful things. I have people in my family who've been involved with drugs and stuff. Should that rub off on me or other family members? No. That's the one person who made those mistakes or did the awful things. That shouldn't be representative of everybody. That's ridiculous.
We need to start openly acknowledging that it is our responsibility as bystanders, whether in the home, whether amongst friends, or in the community. I think we need to take the shame out of the bystander's role.
I agree.
Some people have asked whether a public sex offenders registry is
That's
the
what we
solution.
have in the United States.
The US is the only country with a public sex offenders registry.
There you go.
But whether it is really that effective is not that clear. We have to balance the rights of the accused, who has already served his time, against the rights of the public. Maybe a better way would be to have a private registry where individuals who are going to be working in vocations where they deal a lot with children will have their names checked with the police who are clear or not clear to work in these professions.
Right. Don't make sure that people who are offenders do not find themselves in those situations where they are prone to be having a recurrence, right? If someone did an awful act, went to jail for it, was caned for it, was punished for it, right? And then they're let back out into society, you have to make sure they're not put back into the situation where they can now do that abuse again. I agree there. So it sounds like of all the strict laws in Singapore, this is one that there's a huge problem. Wow. So even there, you want to hear about, Singapore is so good in a lot of ways. Here's a way where they're not. Here's a way where there's a big hole, I feel. Right? For sure. What the fuck is this? I don't know. We're going to be able to watch this. I don't know what this is. It's 13 years old. DJ Easy 2010.
That's how we do it. Money after money, dollar after dollar. It's real, young folk. Tell the family.
This is ancient. This is 4x3 low-res camera footage. What is this? Because this isn't even 13 years old. This has got to be like 20 plus years old. This footage, right? It must be. It certainly looks that old.
Man, you know what I'm saying? We go dump in Shelwood, man. From the park to Shelwood, man. We get money, man.
What are you yelling? What is he yelling about?
Eat that dick up.
They're posing with guns. This is very exciting. Wow.
Why the camera come say, this ain't no fake coochie. This shit come out the mouth. This real shit. Check my shoes.
He left the tag on. Isn't that a thing too? In that certain cultural things that you just leave the tag on to prove that it's like real and how much it costs or something? Because I've seen that. I've seen people who bought hats, like a baseball cap, but they always leave the sticker on and the tag on, like forever. I don't know what it's supposed to mean. Is you're supposed to like the value of it or whatever? I have no idea. But I knew people like that. Yeah, I don't know. This is confusing. I never understood stuff like this. I really, again, I grew up in a part of the country where this was prominent. There were people like this all around me that I was aware of. They would walk into arcades that I was in and act like that. And I don't know. I'm not a part of it. I'm not going to pay any attention to it, you know.
Real. Now check this. Skull and bone.
He's showing like $20 bills. Ooh.
There's raw women with AIDS and states in my hood. Small nigga with blades.
I can't even understand a word he's saying either, right? Like, I don't know what the hell he's saying. I think maybe 1 out of every 20 words I understand. It's like walking into a foreign country and no one speaks English. Like, what? I wouldn't know what the fuck's going on. Like, huh? All right. Anyway, I think we're on to the next video. I think we've seen enough of this one. A whole minute. Internal. You saw that? Internal use only? Interesting. Internal use only. It wasn't meant to be outside of Capcom.
These two ultimate fighters has the most power in their soul. That will determine the outcome.
The fire in my heart will soon come from my fists.
Begin round 1 of match fight.
Fire from my hand. Upward punching flame motion.
Upward punching flame motion. Fire from my hand. Fire from my hand. Upward punching flame motions.
Revolving feet leap.
What?
Blazing inferno of flames from my hands. Sweep. An insanely large amount of fire from my hand. Revolving feet. Sweep. I throw fire. Sweep.
No, happy to so many feet. Fire from my hands.
Activating super uppercut fire flame move.
No, that's amazing. Activating super uppercut fire flame move. Why couldn't that have been in the game? More people would have bought it. That's great. They should have had that as an alternate commentary mode. I mean, they have that now in Street Fighter 6 with the commentators, but imagine if they had that. That would be amazing. So this is actually Street Fighter 4, like a prototype, because you saw it said this is internal only, right? It was only supposed to be for Capcom. I wonder how it leaked, or if Capcom just put it out there as a joke. Fire flame move.
Kick. Final skyward upper punch to end match.
Hey, welcome.
I always enjoy a final skyward upper punch to end matches in fighting games. Those are one of my favorite maneuvers. That was pretty good. So this is Boundary Break, which is an ongoing, channel and series. But I don't think it's from that channel. It's from a different channel. Yeah. So they boundary broke San Andreas.
Another episode of an ongoing series where we basically take the camera anywhere we want to try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. And this time around, we're covering Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which I'm super excited about. Before this, we only covered Grand Theft Auto 5. So taking a look at this one before we move on to 3 and Vice City is going to be a ton of fun. Rockstar Games does a whole bunch of wacky stuff with their cutscenes, and since the environment's so huge and it was a bit of the Wild West for open sandbox games, you could bet yourself that there's going to be some interesting stuff to find. So with that said, let's take a look. The first one we're going to be talking about is OG Loke, and he's got a couple of things going on, but the thing I want to open up this episode with is the fact that the dude has burgers for brains. But I mean that literally. If you take the camera inside of his burger hat, surprising is that you can still see his bandana on the texture, but beyond that, like I said, it's burger texture. What I find very special about this is that it all comes to a point in a way that it looks like the top of his head is the Eye of Sauron. And we'll get back to Loke in a second, but first, I want to talk about this police officer who's hanging upside down from this vent, because taking the camera out of bounds can show you that he's doing a spread eagle in order to keep himself up there, which is pretty fantastic. And also, it gives you an idea of how they force the perspective of a dark void if you were to look inside the vent. It seems to be a triangular prism that all comes to a point because it saves on resources to use that few tries, and still effectively tells the player that, hey, there could be anything in there. And now let's talk about the possessed burger trays. In this cutscene of OG Loke, you can see something that's already a little bit ominous outside the boundaries as his co-worker walks out of frame and his character model seems to disappear, leaving the tray behind. The fact is, the co-worker did not disappear, but in fact, he's hidden underneath the boundaries. But oddly enough, his dinner tray seems to be tied to some animation that we can't see on the character model. And so it starts moving around independently as if it's being moved by a ghost. Even stranger than that is that well outside the boundaries is another burger tray that is going absolutely wacky tobacky. And I'm pretty sure this burger tray is attached to OG Loke. And the distance between the character model in the cutscene versus where the burger tray...
I wonder how these people managed to do this. Are they hacking the game? Like, are they actually finding a way to get into the source code of the game and play these animations outside of the boundaries of what the cameras are supposed to do, because you would think, again, a company like Rockstar probably would have had a lot of protections on their games that you couldn't do that, but we've seen a lot of these pop up now, right, of all popular games. So people are definitely figuring out ways to get around the confines of what you're supposed to see, right?
Is to stay out of sight has been put at such a distance.
Well, let's just fast forward to the end, because obviously this is a long video. Let's see some of the stuff at the end of it, like this. If it works.
You can find the player CJ hidden behind this purple structure. And if we zoom it out, you can see the player CJ and the cutscene CJ all in one shot. And then we got the first introduction of Big Smoke. His character model is also stored out of bounds just below the kitchen. But the object that he uses in this cutscene, which is a bat, is stored inside the scene. But you can see how the bat is tied to the character model, as for whatever reason, when the bat is getting ready to move into scene, you can see Big Smoke's arms sort of move with the bat.
You picked the wrong house, fool!
Hey, Big Smoke! It's me, Carl! Chill!
CJ.
Now let's talk about what happens when CJ gets some cosmetic changes in the game. For example, going into his closet and changing out something like, say, his shirt can show you that he's standing in place with his original outfit, and then the second that the model is swapped out with new clothing, the character model is already immediately in an animation that's in the process of opening the changing door. Also at the barber shops, obviously the barber gets in the way of the camera, so you don't get to see the exact moment in which something like facial hair gets added to the character. But in this case, the facial hair change happens very, very quickly, and the cover up for it hangs in place for a bit longer to give the immersion that he's actually clipping the hair in some way. And like you guys might remember, we talked about interior scenes versus exterior scenes in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and in most cases there's just a black void outside of any.
Alright, I'm bored. Let's go to the next video. Nothing too particularly interesting in boundary breaking this game, sadly.
The sort of doubt that anybody that believes in God has occasionally.
Oh, okay. So the person who submitted this, actually, they're following up on a discussion we had a week or two ago about, if God exists, how could God allow for heinous things to happen? Like, we had this discussion. I can't remember exactly when we had it, if it was on this show or another stream of mine. So someone submitted this clip and said go to around the 4-minute mark, and it's actually discussed. So let's see from the 4-minute mark.
So, sorry, I mean, did Adam and Eve have that level of freedom?
Yes. That's why they chose to sin, because they were free. And they chose to violate God's will. Okay, so that's why Adam and Eve rebel against God, because they're abusing their free will, and that's where life becomes unfair. And you got to read the book of Job, because the book of Job is a penetrating analysis, which it doesn't give all the answers, but it's dealing with this very issue you've raised, which I'm so grateful for. Job, very righteous man, gets the rug pulled out, his children die, he loses all of his wealth, he loses his health, boils break out all over his body, all right? And one of the main points of the book of Job is life is unfair. God is fair. Don't get the two mixed up. So when life throws curveballs into your face, don't clench your fist and wave it at God's face, because it's not God doing that to you. It wasn't God who caused that guy to slip on black ice and die an early death.
No, but God created the world in which that was going to happen. He knew full well. I mean, sorry, I should choose a more specific example in which it's not God simply allowing someone to do harm to someone. It's God allowing a baby to be born, knowing that it's going to, die at 5 years old in horrible pain.
Yeah, I did a funeral 4 weeks ago for a 14-week-old child that hadn't even been born, right? Died in the mother's womb.
Something along those lines,
right.
Yes.
Horrible.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, but no, exactly. How is, I mean, it sort of makes sense.
This is interesting, because I don't know where this is happening, but you know what this reminds me of? This is the kind of stuff they used to do in Rome. The old philosophers, right? The ones that we know of now, like Plato and stuff like that. They would be in an amphitheater, similar to how they're sitting right now. They'd be in a giant crowd, and you'd have one of the philosophers talking with people, and people would come up and talk with the philosopher and have these conversations. And this is how people became deep thought thinkers, is having these kind of open conversations. Interesting, the way that they've laid this out is very simple, but very reminiscent of the old days of philosophical amphitheater thought discussions. It's kind of cool. Anyway.
So, okay, to some extent, that perhaps the world should change and result to human misbehavior, but how should the misbehavior in Adam and Eve affect, I mean, well, an unborn or very recently born human that has not yet had the chance to meaningfully sin? But I mean, I don't know.
Yes, correct. Great point. That little 14-week-old child in that mother's womb did nothing wrong. The child dies, which tips us off to the fact that the unfairness of this life is not a direct result of that person's sin. And that's another reason you got to read the book of Job. Because when Job starts to suffer, a bunch of his friends come to him and they say, obviously, Job, you've sinned, and if you would just repent, no more suffering. And at the end of the book of Job, God says to Job, you better pray for your buddies because I'm going to judge them for their self-righteous, wrong counsel. Job was not suffering because of his sin. Job was suffering because he, along with all of us, are born into an unfair, unjust world.
But then who created the world? God did. So God created the unjust system. If God was good and just, why would he create an unjust, unfair world? I think that's what this guy's trying to ask. How is it fair that awful things happen to people who don't deserve it, who didn't do anything to deserve it? Because it is absolutely true that in the Christian religion, they try to justify bad things with sinning. Oh, well, if you sin, then bad things come to you. It's like a karma system almost. It's not, they don't call it that, that's for sure. But that's not true. Like, so many bad things happen to people all the time who didn't do things to justify that to happen. And good, vice versa. Great, amazing, positive things happen to people who are trash people, who step on others, who hurt others constantly, and they just keep getting away with it, right? So where is God in that mix, right? I don't get that. And the thing is, we were watching for several minutes. He's not answering that question. He just keeps saying, oh, well, the world's unfair. Yeah, but who made the world? I didn't. Humans didn't create Earth, right? So what did? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you really believe that there is an all-powerful entity out there that is good and just, why would the good and just all-powerful entity allow injustice to the level that we have observed it here, right?
Well, and God wanted to prove Job's, I mean, maybe that motivation is overblown, but he wanted to demonstrate to Satan that Job would continue to worship him despite this unfairness.
Good point. Good point. Job, the book of Job points out that real faith in God is not based on the circumstances of life. It's based on the character of God being good.
That's that's the crux of it, really. Like,
exactly.
If he is the kind of guy that would allow or I mean, his direct is a.
See, that's all right. I'm gonna go along with that because that's the stupidest reasoning I've ever heard. Just believe that something is good innately, no matter what, despite what actually you observe. That's like saying, so just believe that your dad is a great person, even though every single day he beats you. Oh, it doesn't matter what actually happened. You got to keep having faith, right? What? What? Where does that come from? Like, how does that make any sense at all? Right? So in my life, I was born with horrible medical issues that aren't my fault and I can never fix. And I got stepped on by everyone in my life, treated poorly, right? And everything in my life is awful, but I'm supposed to believe that there's an all-knowing, all-powerful, benevolent God out there that cares about me. I like to base life off of, like, science and fact and things that are, you know, cause and effect, you know. That's ridiculous. So the story of Job is just blindly believe no matter what happens to you, you have to still worship and love something out there that has made no effort to actually, you know, do anything good for you. Because, you know, what? That's crazy to me. Like, huh? So just blindly believe things. Right? Like, okay, just blindly believe just because you're told that there is a benevolent entity out there. Just believe that it loves you and cares for you and just never lose faith despite the fact that everything in your life has shown you the opposite. Oh, okay. It's an interesting way to go through life. I mean, holy crap. And the guy literally just said that, right? Like, he just said this to the guy. He's like, yeah, that's the story of Job. So that's a really dumb story then, right? Like...
degree of involvement in Job's suffering is, yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, kind of hard to pin down.
Good,
but
you're right.
He was, at the very least, complicit in it.
Okay, you're right. He allowed Satan to buffet Job.
Yeah. And
Yes.
Why?
I do not know. Okay?
Oh, no, sorry, not why did you do that, but I mean, why would you, or I mean, doesn't that cast doubt on this being a God that you would want to obey?
Okay, good. Great question.
I mean, sorry, good.
You're right. All of a sudden, I'm getting, whoa, you know? God allows that to happen?
Yeah.
What's going on here? What's his character really like? That's why the cross of Christ is so crucial. Because what the cross of Christ shows us is...
The story of Job is before Christ. Huh? Job happened before Christ. He's using Christ. He's using something that was after the fact as a justification of something that was a story in the Bible before Christ existed. You can't do that. You gotta go in order. What?
God is a suffering God. And that is why suffering people who are poor often instinctually are able to trust in Christ because they can connect with a suffering God and they don't have all these barriers of pride, be it material pride, intellectual pride, physical pride, to hop over. Instinctually, they know they're suffering. They know they're poor. And when they see the cross of Christ, when they begin to understand God is a suffering God who humbles himself, bleeds and dies on a cross, whoa, I can connect with that God. Does that make sense?
No. It doesn't at all. It doesn't explain it at all. It doesn't answer the question. Your answer is, well, God suffered on the cross. Okay, that happened after the Job situation. So what you're, in fact, he just disproved his own argument. Because what he just said was, well, God has realized his error, and so he went back and he suffered just like us to show that he cares enough. Well, you screwed up because you just said that God just admitted errors. But I thought God was supposed to be all-knowing, all-powerful, benevolent, you know, all good, but is fallible? I thought that God was infallible, right? Oops. I don't know. There's a lot of contradictions. And the thing is, we're not going to turn this entire show into a religious discourse here. But it's interesting how when you get into a real discourse with someone like this, and you start bringing up these very valid points, right, about stuff, they'll always go to like one of these tenets or one of these symbols. Oh, it's the cross of Christ. What? You didn't answer the question. So what if God also decided later on in time to suffer like a human? What does that prove? The suffering still exists. So just continue the cycle of injustice and suffering? No. At some point, the injustice and suffering should end, no? Or stop. If there really is an all-powerful, benevolent God, then it should stop, right? It's like all of our existence is just an endless test of everything. Like, why? Right? I don't know. You see, again, when I was younger, and again, I was raised Roman Catholic, and I still have a lot of that imbued in me. I do. I have a lot of those feelings of morality and things in me, and I'm glad that I was raised at least in some kind of a cultural situation where I could understand right from wrong and things that are morally right or wrong and things like that. But at the same time, when you analyze a lot of this stuff and you get down into the deeper parts of it, a lot of it just doesn't hold up or make sense. But someone like this video, I guess, is supposed to hold. I mean, I'm not going to watch 30 minutes of it. That's the thing. Maybe if I watch the whole 30 minutes, the guy has better answers. But his answer to that was awful. Why would God allow Job to suffer his whole life, right, as a test of his love for him? And why is the moral of the story that Job should love God? Oh, because of the cross of Christ. Huh? Oh, because God chose to suffer at one point to be like us. That doesn't answer the question. You just created more suffering, more injustice, more awful things happening. I mean, if anything, that's a bad example. That's a bad rationale, right? I don't know, man. That was one of the most awful things I've ever heard as an answer to the question. Like, that would totally piss people off. Like, you're telling me this is so, oh, yeah, well, I know you suffered your whole life. Here, I'll also suffer a little bit too. Oh, how about you just stop the suffering? Stop the cycle of pain and injustice instead of having everyone equally suffer. That's pretty stupid, no? Anyway, I'm sure now what will happen. Oh, by the way, I'll say one final thing too. I will. Answers like this are literally used as tools to control humans. All right? They are. Because religion, not so much today in a modern society, but back in the day when religion was tied in with controlling bodies in history, okay? They would say, well, you see, you should listen to us people in power because of this justification, because God said this, because God did this, because God did that. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of these holy books have been rewritten over the time and changed. There's entire books that used to be part of the Bible that are not anymore. There's now parts of the Bible that were rewritten to be worded differently, to have different meaning, when they had original meanings that are completely separate from what you read now in the Bible. This has happened over and over in human history. It's documented. It's historical fact. You can find that this has happened. And the church and governmental bodies have used things in religion to control the populace, to say, just accept it as it is, because see, it says here in the Bible, or because this happened, this is the story of Job, so just accept it as it is. And then people are like, oh, well, all right, well, we won't revolt. We won't stand up for our own rights. We'll just take it, right? Because that's how life is, you know? Oh, but Christ was on the cross. It's like, huh? So just take all the suffering and injustice in your life because Christ was on the cross. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. Anyway, I think that's a good place to split the part and continue on. We had our religious discussion for the week now. See, I do like this, though. I do like this about the show, is that we have this variety of stuff we can talk about. I mean, a minute ago, we were watching people acting crazy in, what was it, Baltimore? And now we're having a serious, like, religious discussion about the human condition and suffering. The same video. You want to talk about the biggest span of topics you can have. That's what this show is kind of all about, right? So, anyway, thank you for watching DSP versus the Internet, episode 52. We still got 2 more hours to go, and I will see you all in the next part. Sound good? Thanks. See you then.